Hello and welcome everybody to the German Windows Virtual Desktop User Group. And I want to welcome our very first guest for this evening, Bas van Kaam from Nerdio, presenting us the Nerdio Manager for WVD. Welcome, Bas.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Otherwise, you guys will let me know, I'm sure. So thanks very much, Patrick and Marcel as well, of course, for inviting me to speak during the event tonight and share some of the Nerdio Manager for WVD magic, as I like to call it. Let me start by sharing my screen. That would be a good place to start. Right. Can you all see my slides? Just one yes would be enough, or no?
Yes, all fine.
Okay, thanks. So again, thank you. I'm going to talk about Nerdio Manager for WVD. I'd like to start out with a short introduction. So introduce myself just for a couple of minutes so you know who I am a bit better, what I like to spend my time on, and so on and so forth. Talk just 1 or 2 minutes about the company Nerdio as well, where we came from, how we started, and where we are today, of course. And most of the time tonight, I'd like to spend on demos, or actually one big demo, I think you could say. And I'd like to, spend some time on a couple of specific topics, if you will. So auto-scaling in more detail for hosted shared environments, for personal assigned desktops, things like that. The overall management capabilities around image management within Manager for WVD, just overall management tasks, shadowing sessions, disconnecting sessions, logging off sessions, how to configure certain things within Manager for WVD on a per host pool basis, things like that. Talk about MSIX app attach, of course, because that's something that's now part of our solution as well. Hopefully we'll have time to go over a bit of monitoring. We are partnered with Sepago, so Marcel works there, of course. So that's a very nice strategic partnership for us to have. So that means that the from Sepago is also part of the Nerdio Manager for WVD equation, if you will. So my name is Bas van Kaam. I'm based in the Netherlands, near Amsterdam. It's like 15 minutes by car in a place called the Velzenbroek. I'm sure most of you don't know it or haven't even heard of it before. Engaged to Tineke, and we actually spoke about that this week because we have been engaged for a couple of years now. And we are making plans to get married next year sometime. So see how it goes with the COVID situation, of course, but exciting stuff for sure. So together with Tineke, I always say, sort of funny meant, of course, that I'm sponsor of Team van Kaam. My 3 kids, Julia, Sophie, and Max. And Max is the kid I had with together with Tineke. He's 22 months old now, so a lot of fun to have that little guy around as well. Furthermore, I'm involved in various communities. I've written a couple of books. You see the bite-sized book on the screen as well, hopefully. That's a project I did together with Christian Brinkhoff, as you might know. Of course, his name is everywhere in the book and on the book as well. Hundreds of blog posts. I think I passed the 450 mark not too long ago on various platforms. I used to do, in-person presentations, like, a couple of you guys, I'm sure as well. I'm really hoping that we can go back to what we then called the new normal, so to speak, and have those types of meetings as well. Would be fun to have a German WVD user group in person, let's say next year or within a year and a half or something like that. So hobbies, so sort of hobby became work as well. If you look at the blogging and writing stuff. Like to go out for a run 3-4 times, sometimes even 5 times a week. So if you are sportive as well, are on Strava, let's connect on there also, just like on my other socials. Please look me up, let's exchange a couple of things on there also. I'm a current MVP for the Enterprise Mobility section, which of course includes WVD, but RDS as well. Part of a couple of other community initiatives, the EUC Digest podcast. And also we have a Dutch Windows Virtual Desktop User Group as well. And more to come on that, not too long from now. All right, about Nerdio. The company was founded by Vadim Vladimirsky, who is still the current CEO as well. In 2016, as you can see on the slide as well, of course. And just about 2 years ago, Joseph Landis, who used to work for Microsoft for almost 25 years, joined the company as well. And together they run the company, you could say. So, 25 years at Microsoft, they saw an opportunity. They saw what was happening around, public clouds, WVD, and those sorts of developments. They jumped right in, saw an opportunity, and went for it. Well, and I can say now from personal experience, it's going really, really well. Started out, as you can see as well, in 2017 with Nerdio Private Cloud. That became Nerdio for Azure. So that also means that our solutions, of which we have two within the portfolio, Nerdio for Azure and Manager for WVD, the one we are going to talk about in more detail today, are only focused on the Azure platform. So Microsoft and Azure only. Now, Nerdio for Azure is, I always say, the second product within our portfolio, but of course the company was founded around that solution. So I mainly focus on Manager for WVD, but of course Nerdio for Azure is also there and is a really, really big proposition for us. Much bigger than Manager for WVD is today, but of course it's still a lot younger also. We're not going to talk about Nerdio for Azure today, but just know it's there as well. It's aimed at the MSP market, works in a completely different way, has various WVD management capabilities, but a lot of other stuff is built in as well. And as you can see in 2019, when WVD went GA, so about 10 months ago or something like that, we had multiple WVD management capabilities built in as of day one in Nerdio for Azure. What happened was, Nerdio for Azure, like I just mentioned, is aimed at the MSP market. So a lot of other types of companies and customers saw what we could do around WVD, the management part within Nerdio for Azure. They were not an MSP, for example, or they didn't want to do business with an MSP or whatever the reason may be, but they kept asking for WVD management capabilities like they saw in Nerdio for Azure as well. And you could say that that's how Nerdio Manager for WVD was born. They started developing in late 2019, private preview beginning of January, a public preview in March, and it now sort of silently went GA, and we have a couple of hundred paying customers globally. So that's it for the introduction. Let's talk about Manager for WVD, and like I mentioned at the beginning, I'd like to spend most of my time showing you a thing or two as well. So Manager for WVD, we do a couple of things really well. So I'm talking about the added value, as you'll hopefully find out in just a couple of minutes for yourself also. So we make working with and managing, optimizing, and so on and so forth, WVD on a daily basis as easy as it possibly can be. So that means that, the biggest part of your IT workforce, your technicians within the company will be able to, to set it up, to manage it, to do ongoing image management, to optimize it, and so on and so forth. And you won't need any specific knowledge of ARM templates, the JSON language that goes with it, and of course now biceps, which still, turns out to be JSON in the end, but that's a different story, of course, or any PowerShell or deep Azure knowledge for that matter. So you don't need nothing of that, and you will still be able to, to manage WVD deployments with hundreds, thousands of users and machines. And of course, an important point is also that we take care of the feature gap, which is still there. If you compare it to the native solution from the Azure portal, probably will always be some sort of a gap, and that's what we try to close next to all of the other stuff. So reducing costs, that comes down to, of course, easy management, more efficient. You'll be saving hours per week, which of course will also reduce the costs overall, if you will. But also the advanced and unique auto-scaling engine that we have built in, which I'm going to show you, of course, saves companies up to 75, even 80 in some cases % on Azure Compute and Azure Storage resources. And that's something I can easily show you how that works and where those cost savings are coming from as well. If you look at how this solution is deployed and how it's built, and that's something I will show you in the next 2 slides, so we will get technical within a minute. Then it's also reinforcing existing security. It will be deployed within the tenant of the customer, so no third party will have access. Nerdio does not have access. You have full control together with the IT partner, for example. So that brings me to the Nerdio Manager for WVD deployment architecture. Like I mentioned, it is deployed into the customer's own tenant. So from a security perspective, you have full control. Nobody else has access. Nerdio doesn't have access as well. And you can decide who else should get access to that environment, if that is at all necessary, of course. Again, together with your IT partner or just being the end customer, that's also possible, of course. So it's a standalone Azure application, not multi-tenant. So it's not a hosted shared management plane of some sort hosted somewhere in Azure, which will be managed by Nerdio, for example. So that's not the case. It's deployed and built through the Azure Marketplace, which makes that part also very flexible. And because of that also, it is available in all regions worldwide. So from a high level perspective, You can see the marketplace in the middle, various customers, which will have various tenants, and I'll get in a bit more detail on that tenants and not permissions, but tenants and subscriptions, I was about to say, in just a couple of minutes as well, of course. But just so you know, you deploy it from the Azure Marketplace into a tenant of a customer or your own tenant, of course. And here you can see out of which services, and there are a bit more than those, but this is to show you, to tell you that Nerdio Manager for WVD is built 100% out of native Azure technology. So no traditional or legacy, as some call it, technology like VMs that we manage for you or anything like that. No, these are platform as a service services, and that's where Nerdio Manager for WVD is built on top of. Right, I think it's about time for a demo. All right. Hopefully everyone is able to to see everything that I'm going to show, of course, and to read some of the letters and so on and so forth. I had a widescreen, so I've adjusted my screen resolution already. So hopefully this will work. Now, before you will be able to log into the graphical user interface of Manager for WVD, as you can see here, you will need to answer a couple of basic questions. And these are things around which VNet would you like to connect, just to start out with, which resource group, do you have an Active Directory, or you need to fill in an Active Directory, but just to start out, and then afterwards you will be able to change those settings and to add multiple networks, multiple resource groups, and well, basically everything you can think of. Now those settings can be found under, well, what's in the name, under settings. And if you look, for example, at your Azure environment, you will see your primary tenants, you will see your subscriptions, and here you can see as well, we have multiple linked networks, we have multiple linked resource groups, and this is also configurable on a per host pool basis, for example. Now you will always have one main tenant, which will be responsible, so one main Azure Active Directory, or one Azure Active Directory, I should say, which is responsible for identity, authorization, authentication, things like that. But you can add in multiple tenants for your VMs to live in, for example. You can have, however, add in multiple subscriptions per tenant, so you do have that flexibility. But of course, this has everything to do with what I just told you, the way it is developed, deployed, and so on and so forth. And also another big advantage of this, so it being platform as a service services, is that it's very flexible. So from a development perspective, so we have new versions of our software coming out every month, sometimes even twice a month. But also from a, it's also flexible from a resource perspective. So you can start out small, a bit bigger, even bigger if it, if we're talking about thousands of desktops or users that you need to manage, for example. And I'm talking about the underlying platform as a service, services, resources that you can, of course, manage yourself as well. So the plans that go with it, for example, an app plan, which is spun up and deployed, that's something you will be able to manage yourself as well. So you can go from a more expensive app plan, for example, to a cheaper one if your, let's say, deployment is relatively small, 50, 100, 150 users or something like that. But that's easy to do and easy to configure. Not something I'm going to show you now, of course. So we also have multiple integrations, and basically everything you see under settings, so everything I'm showing you now, think of it as it being the basic or the default configuration, and then afterwards, as you can see on these screens also, you can change everything, you can add in multiple resource groups and networks and all those types of things, and there's also a ton of stuff that you can manage and change on a per host pool level as well, as I'm about to show you. So here you see, for example, your Active Directory, but you will be able to add in multiple Active Directories. You can do that here, and you can then configure that on a per host pool basis. For example, if that's something you would like to do, or not use the default Active Directory here on a per host pool basis, but you would like to use different OUs, for example, to place your machines in. Also possible. So about the other integrations, of course, we have the Sepago Azure Monitor from Sepago. Again, what's in the name, like I mentioned at the beginning as well. Easy to enable and disable from this interface. If you're not familiar with the Azure Monitor from Sepago, we have a couple of very clear instruction videos, short, so within 15 minutes or so, you know what you need to do to get it up and running. And if you have it enabled, you will also see the monitoring tab, which normally won't be here. If the Sepago Azure Monitor is disabled, you will see it pop up here, and then you would be able to configure your own dashboards and things like that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So if you would like to work with Azure files for your FSLogix profile containers for storage, for example, it's just an easy wizard, a couple of drop-down menus, a few fields to fill in. And then the configuration part, once you hit add, the configuration and the installation will all be taken care of, fully automated underneath the underlying or on the underlying Azure platform as well, of course. The same applies to Azure NetApp files, but also profile containers from an FSLogix profile storage perspective, or storage containers. I should say the storage location for the FSLogix profile storage containers. That's the correct way to say it. But again, this is the default, and you can easily diverge on a per host pool basis from all of this as well, which I'll again show you. So here you can see workspaces and tenants. They can both be managed from the same interface, as you can see here, which brings me to the middle of the settings tabs. So this is the object model. We have set it to hybrid, which is something that we came up with. So you are able to manage both tenants and workspaces from the same interface, which is important, of course, because a lot of our customers, and I'm guessing your customers as well, already have tenants or workspaces. And when you install Manager for WVD, you can easily associate existing tenants and workspaces with Manager for WVD as well. So depending on the amount of hosts you have up and running, that will take somewhere between 15 or 30 minutes, or even a bit faster than that. And then you will be able to manage your existing sessions, your existing WVD deployments with Nerdio Manager for WVD as well. But here you can see you can also change it to fall or spring. Just click it, wait a minute, and you'll be good to go. But again, a lot of people will have tenants already, or a lot of customers. So then once we are able to manage those tenants by associating them with Nerdio Manager for WVD, once the installation has been done, we also have migrate to ARM. So this is all good to go. As you can see, the migrate button will light up if I select one as well. I'm not going to show you the process because it can take some time. But this is sort of a sneak peek, if you will, because this will become available next week once we release our latest version. I think it's 2.4. Or 2.5.0. Yeah, 2.5.0. We are now on 2.4.0. Yes. So here you would be able to select any of your existing host pools under one of your tenants, of course. And of course, you will be able to select any of the workspaces you might then have up and running already. You can also choose what to do with the user assignments, as you can see here, and how many hosts you would like to have migrated at the same time, so parallel to each other, you could say. Here you can monitor how many things basically can fail or go wrong before this whole process will be halted and be reverted as well. And of course, like many other things within Manager for WVD, it's very flexible in that way. You can schedule all this as well. Of course, those machines will or might still have active users on them. That can always happen. So if you do this at night, the chance of that happening is a lot smaller already. But if that's still the case, those active sessions will still be reminded, or will at least get a message. And in this case, then 10 minutes afterwards, those machines will be migrated over from their current tenant to the workspace. But at least your users will have some time to log off, save their work, or anything like that. And of course, this can be changed to something else also. All right, just so you know, it's in there. So hop over to workspaces. Everything I'm going to show you around workspaces works exactly the same way around tenants as well, just so you know. So let's start by adding in a workspace, just to see how easy that is and how quick it works as well. Give it a name. It doesn't really matter what type of name. So this is the friendly name. So this is, as you can see here as well, what your users will be able to see later on. So you might want to give that a bit more thought. Of course, you can work with descriptions for administrative purposes, for example, and you need to select a resource group and an Azure region where to deploy this workspace in. Then we would click OK. This will just take a couple of seconds, as you can see on the screen as well. And now we are ready to add one or multiple host pools, and then later on the hosts as well. So here you can choose between a dynamic host pool and a static host pool. The only difference is that with a static host pool, you will need to add in machines manually. So one by one, basically, you will need to monitor user demand for yourself. So if more machines are needed, you will need to add them in manually, which makes sense. And with dynamic, and that's the one, of course, I want to show you tonight, you can make use, or you will automatically make use of the auto scaling engine in the background. So again, give it a name. It doesn't really matter what type of name. You can work with descriptions. But the next step is, of course, a bit more important, because here you would need to decide which desktop experience you would like to offer to your users. So this means a hosted shared desktop environment. Perhaps you would like to publish applications from this host pool exclusively, so without a desktop. You can do VDI as non-persistent. So it means a one-to-one relation with regards to the VM. So one user per VM, but non-persistent. So everything the user does on the machine will get destroyed or deleted once he or she logs off or restarts the machine. But you can also do personal assigned desktops. Persistent, that means. So if a user changes something on that particular machine, it will be persistent, meaning it will be saved. So it will also be available the next time that user logs into the same desktop virtual machine. Now this is important. This is the name prefix, but this is the name prefix used by the autoscaling engine to give your machine a unique name. So what it will do, it will use the name prefix and it will generate an alphanumeric string and it will attach it to the name prefix. So the name will always be unique. And the best thing is these names will be reused. At least that's enabled by default. You can also turn it off, but of course it's very handy to have. So that means if the autoscaling engine, for example, adds in one or multiple machines because of user demand increase, then later on those machines are removed again, and then later on they are added again because user demand fluctuates, of course, per hour, per week, per day, you name it. Sometimes you never know. But anyway, if those machines are then added back again by the autoscaling engine, or are created again, I should say, then those same names will be reused later on, which is of course handy to have for Active Directory purposes and GPOs and whitelisting and all those types of things, and probably a lot more that you can think of, certificates, you name it. So you need to select a network to connect to, and of course a desktop image to apply to these machines once they are created by the autoscaling engine. I'm just going to select a random one now because it doesn't really matter, and I'd like to spend a bit more time on desktop images, importing, management, updating host within host pools once we are done with the autoscaling part. So you can select any type of VM size. So these are all of the types you can find, or sizes you can find on the native portal as well. Of course, these are the APIs in the background talking, and the same applies to the various OS disks that go with the various VM sizes also. Select a resource group to deploy this dynamic host pool into, click OK. This will just take a couple of seconds longer than creating a workspace. So it's now loading up the autoscale configuration screen, as you'll see in just a few seconds. 10-12 seconds it normally takes, and then we will be able to to start configuring this host pool in a bit more detail, making use of the autoscaling technology, of course. Okay, hopefully it will pop up not too long from now. It should have been here already. That's always the fun part with live demos. Just take a sip of water in between. Right, there we go. So normally this is a bit faster, so let's say like 10 to 12 seconds faster than this. Anyway, just 1 second. Bit of a dry throat, and I don't want to cough on on the recording, so just mute myself for just 1 second. So it's turned off by default. Flip it on with the switch here. Here you can see all of the information we just had a look at and we just configured basically. And here's the reuse host names as well, together with the name prefix, like I mentioned. You can turn it off, but there's really no reason to do so. Now, furthermore, you see a lot of drop-down menus, a lot of fields you can fill in freely. So these can be any type of number. So this can be 50, this can be 13. It doesn't really matter. But of course, if you look at the percentages, this is something between 0 and 100. Anyway, all of this adds up to certain costs on a monthly basis. So the number of machines, the type of VM template I select, and so on and so forth. So here you can see an estimate of your minimum and maximum costs depending on what you configure and fill in here. And I can show you that as well. If I turn the 5 into 3 and look at the costs, those will change with it. Let's turn it back to 5. But again, for the demo, this doesn't really matter, of course. So your actual costs will be somewhere in between because, of course, you never know beforehand how users will act, how many resources you will have consumed throughout the week, month, depending on what your users are doing and so on and so forth. But that makes sense, of course. So let's get into the configuration part. So host pool sizing. Here we can tell the autoscale engine that the base host pool capacity in this particular case is 5, but again, it can be any number. So that means that we will always have at least 5 machines as part of this host pool, which is sort of the basis. Well, it's called base host pool capacity, not for nothing, of course. And here we can say if we would like to have one of those 5 machines, if we would like to have them all turned off, for example, if you would like, oh, that's the top one, sorry, and then this one. So you can set it to 0, which means none of those 5 machines will be booted. So you won't have to pay for compute resources and so on and so forth. Meaning 100% cost optimization, if you will. But normally you would set this to 1, you know, also to, you know, for your users, the user experience. Perhaps somebody is working in the weekends or at nights or whatever, and then they don't have to wait for a machine to be started, and so on and so forth. So you can see why we have this built in. Now, if that one machine, that single machine, isn't enough, of course, it will start to boot those other full machines. And if that isn't enough, you can also tell the engine that it is allowed to add an additional number of machines. So let's say 2 in this case, which means if we put 5 and 2 together, the maximum host pool size of this specific host pool will be 7. It can be no more because we have set to the engine scale out up to 2 machines and no more. So that's it for this particular host pool in this case. Now, before this will happen, there needs to happen something else first, of course. So there needs to be logic for this, or this needs to be based on some sort of logic, which brings me to the scaling logic. So you can work with CPU usage, average active sessions, available sessions. And by the way, you see all of these information icons. Just click them. It will tell you exactly what you are doing, what type of resource you are configuring, or functionality or feature or whatever, where you need to go to find certain information, what you need to fill in, things like that, if you are ever wondering. But anyway, here you can see that RAM usage is being worked on for a future release also. So then you will have 4 to choose from. I have to say, in practice, it's mostly CPU usage that we see being used. Now here we tell the engine that it will need to scale out up to 1 machine or any other number that you would like to fill in if the utilization goes above 65% for 5 minutes or anything else you can configure here. And it will do the same with scaling in, so completely removing a machine if it drops below 40% for 50 minutes or 5, 30 or 60. Now, with removing machines, it's always a bit tricky, especially when you're dealing with hosted shared environments. There will be other users on those machines as well. So we have a couple of things built in to help you with that also. For example, you can tell the engine that, let's see, between 8 in the morning, I think that's a good example, and let's pick 6 p.m. Where is it? There. 6 p.m. in the afternoon, of course, depending on your time zone, always keep an eye on that. We now tell the engine that it is not allowed to shut down machines or to scale in and completely remove machines between these working hours. It is allowed to before, so as of 6 p.m. At night until 8 in the morning, but not between these hours, because most of our workers will be working. They will have active sessions. They will be creating stuff, working on reports, and so on and so forth. And before this, they will probably have breakfast. They're bringing their kids to school. And after 6 p.m., well, you probably will be in a webinar like you are tonight, or, bring your kids to bed, have dinner, you name it. So that makes sense. So this definitely helps, a big deal even, but it's not enough. So this is something we combine with what we call scale in aggressiveness. You can set it to high, medium, low, and I'm going to tell you what the differences are, of course, but just remember, you can always find it here also. Excuse me. So if it's set to high, what will happen is the machines will be put into drain mode. Then after that, it will look for empty machines first and scale those in. And then it will look for the machines with the least amount of active sessions, and it will follow that route until all of the machines have been shut down or are removed from a auto-scaling perspective. Now, when scaling in machines with active sessions, again, like I just mentioned previously also, they will get a message first, and then 10 minutes after, or 15, 30, and so on and so forth, depending on what you configure here, those machines will actually be scaled in, shut down, and so on and so forth. Now with medium, it's sort of the same thing. So again, first they will be put into drain mode. It will look for the empty machines first, and then it will only look for machines with disconnected sessions, but it will leave all of the machines with active sessions alone. Now with low, you've probably guessed it, it will do sort of the same thing. So again, drain mode, but it will only look for machines without any sessions, or inactive sessions, I should say, just like the other ones, but it will do nothing beyond that. So this is sort of the how you take care of the fine line between cost optimization and the user experience, if you will. Now, in between, we have pre-stage hosts. So here we can tell the system or the auto-scaling engine that, for example, from Monday to Friday at 8 a.m. in the morning, again, always keep an eye on your time zone, we would like to have 1 or multiple machines booted, ready to go, to take care of login storms, boot storms, or just help with the user experience, which of course also helps in my previous examples if you do this right. So, well, you get my point. So this is really helpful as well. Now we spoke about messaging, but we also have auto heal broken hosts. And we have had this built in just a few weeks ago, and we've had some very, very good responses to this feature. So the WVD agent, as you might know, it can give back multiple types of statuses, negative ones as well, as you can see here. I think these are 11 different statuses. You can add in as many as you would like. And then if this is true together with has no sessions or has no active sessions, you can configure it to do a couple of things. So for example, you can restart the machines once or multiple times, and then with a couple of minutes in between to make sure to, you know, that they get through the reboot process in total. Or I should say, you can also tell the autoscale engine to remove the machine and recreate it, or to leave it as is. But you would probably have this taken care of fully automated, so you won't have to worry about a thing, basically. Because if it's removed, recreated, like I mentioned in the beginning, it will be able to reuse the host name as well in this particular case also. So this is a really great additional feature to have. All right, so now we are still configuring a dynamic host pool. So that would mean that if I click save now, it will start to auto provision these 5 machines as the base host pool capacity, and it will leave one in a booted state, which I'm not going to do now because of resources and it's a demo and so on and so forth, but that's how it would work in practice. All right. So let's hop over to, workspaces, an existing workspace. Let's see, personal assigned desktops. So these are personal assigned persistent desktops. And of course, we can do auto scaling for those types of machines as well. So go to the configuration page of auto scaling. This is how that would work for the other auto scaling page you just saw as well. This looks a bit different, but in the end, the result is the same. You can again set working hours. Of course, it works a bit differently because it's in a one-to-one relation. You have one user using one machine, so you don't have active sessions. You have an active session or a disconnected session or something like that. That's basically the only difference. So it works technically a bit different under the hood. So let's say from Monday to Friday, again, we can configure it from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. But again, you can configure this on a per host pool level. So, you know, if there are multiple use cases, multiple configurations you can think of, because you can play around with all this, of course, and that goes for the other configuration or auto scaling configuration page as well. Very flexible. Just, you know, create a couple of dynamic host pools and start working away. But again, these will be your working hours. Keep an eye on your time zone. I always need to mention that. And then we have power of aggressiveness, power on timing, and power off timing. And it's important to realize that power of aggressiveness works together with, or in conjunction, you could say, with power of timing. Now here, this is just as with the scale in aggressiveness. We have again high, medium, and low, and it's sort of the same thing. You know, we won't need drain mode with one-to-one assigned machines, of course, but it will. It is now allowed, if you put it too high, to shut down machines with an active session on it as well. Of course, it will send a message first, and then 10 minutes after, that machine will be shut down. But that might not something you want to have when power of timing is set to continuously, because that would mean that after 6 p.m. in the afternoon, it will start to look, okay, which machines are I allowed to turn off? And if this is set to high, it will also be allowed to shut down machines with active user sessions. Again, they will be notified, but this is set to continuously. So the next time they log in, so let's say 15 minutes after this has been or has taken place, the same thing will happen again. So if you set it to medium, you'll make sure that that won't happen. Because with medium, the system is only allowed to shut down machines with inactive sessions and with disconnected sessions. And inactive sessions applies solely to low, if you set it to low. So together with power of aggressiveness and power of timing, you can get a really, really long way. And power on timing, well, it speaks for itself. You can do it once, never continuously. But power on timing will, of course, happen at the beginning of the day. So at 8 a.m., these machines, as part of this host pool, will all be booted. And then the rest kicks into play, you could say. Now, there's something else with this as well. We have various users and roles built in. So this is role-based access, if you will. Very handy for all types of roles within your organization, of course, so like the help desk and the admin guys. But we also have a special one, which is the end user role. Now, if an end user gets the end user role, then, and he or she, I need to mention that as well, of course, has a personal assigned desktop, excuse me, then he or she will be able to log into Nerdio Manager for WVD, and then he or she will be able to stop, start, and restart their own personal assigned machines. So they won't see anything else within the portal, only the sessions and the machines that they are a part of being assigned to a specific host pool. So very handy. And if you combine this with the auto scaling part I just showed you, there's basically not a use case you cannot not handle. Okay, let me just take a quick sip of water in between. All right, here we go. Desktop images. So a couple of things I'd like to tell and show you about that also. Now, of course, it makes sense to import images from the library or from a custom Azure VM, as I'll show you in just a minute, within Manager for WVD, because then you will be able to manage your images all from the same management portal, including all of the other WVD related stuff and WVD native itself, of course. So first, let's have a look at the options which you have to import any images or VMs that you might already have. So this means importing an existing VM that you might have already been using for a couple of weeks or months on the Azure platform, for example, or perhaps one you just built. That's also possible, of course. Give it a name, description, and basically all we need is the SaaS URL. And again, if you don't know what it is or how to get it or anything else, click on the icon. It will tell you what to do, what it is, and so on and so forth. And this means that all it needs to be is a managed disk, and then we would be able to generate the SaaS URL, copy and paste it in here, and then we can do the import. Of course, you would need to look at some of the other options here as well. And this is where it gets pretty nifty again. So as you can see, you can domain join it. You can select the domain if you have multiple configured within Manager for WVD here as well. You can set time zone redirection in the time zone, install, uninstall any existing agents perhaps. And then if you would use this image or this VM as a base for another host pool and start to add in one or multiple hosts, this will all be taken care of for you, of course. So we will take care of the installation of the WVD agent, the FSLogix agent, and of course the Sepago agent if that's configured and enabled as well, and so on and so forth. You will then click OK. This will take 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how big the image is, which region you're working in, how busy Azure is, and so on and so forth. Makes sense. Now here we have multiple options. So again, a lot of the same fields, a bit less to configure here, but still definitely worth to check out. Here we can, for example, add in a ready custom-made Azure Marketplace image. So these are, the ready-to-go images from Microsoft themselves. We can also work with Azure custom images, which you might have, configured on the underlying Azure platform, for example. And we also directly integrate with the shared image gallery also. So these images can all be imported into Manager for WVD, and then you will be able to do, well, multiple things. And I'll get back to the shared image gallery and Azure custom images in just a couple of minutes also. Just know that if you're using an Azure custom image to update your host pools, or your hosts within your host pools, I should say, you don't need to recreate them. You don't need to reassign any users. That's all been taken care of for you. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, once you have imported an image, multiple things you can do. So for one, you can power it on, of course. Then you can choose, I would like to make a backup for 1 or multiple weeks. And if the retention period expires, it will only throw away the backup and nothing else. Now, if you have made multiple backups throughout the weeks, the months, you also have versioning. So you could say that, well, okay, what I did now with this image, it doesn't work in test or production even, perhaps. I would like to refer to an earlier image version. Well, that's something you can do from here as well. We can also clone images, and if you then select, for example, a network in another region, it will clone over the image to the other region as well. Easy as that, so you don't have to worry about anything when it comes to that as well. Now, if you have it powered on, you can use the IP address to, for example, RDP into the machine, make any changes, install software, apply security patches, well, anything you can think of. Then you can set it or power it down and set it as an image again. That's something that will be that the button will save for you as well. And then the whole sys prepping process and so on and so forth will be taken care of for you as well. And as you might know, you have a I think it's a max of 8 sysprep cycles on a single image, but you won't have to ever worry about that. You can do it 20, 25, 50, 100 times. That's all been taken care of under the hood as well. And perhaps later on in a later version, that's something you might be able to bypass, but I don't have any details on that now. But those are all questions we get, IDs from the community, and so on and so forth. And all of that is being gathered. That's something I do on a daily basis, weekly basis as well. And every once in a while we look at all the feature requests and suggestions and so on and so forth, and it really helps shape our roadmap. That's the truth. I can't put it any other way. Okay, so let's say you've powered on an image, you've made changes, sysprepping has been done, so the image is good to go to update one of your host pools. Go into workspaces, select an existing host pool. Now, it doesn't really matter which one I take. So resize, reimage is where you would need to go. And of course, I won't be able to show you everything that's part of Manager for WVD, just a couple of the bigger things, and just a few smaller things once I'm done with the reimage part as well. But you see the drop-down menus, and we can do a lot around native WVD. So here you would be able to select the desktop image you might just have updated, for example, like I just mentioned. Or if you have any images on, let's say, in Azure custom images or images on the shared or within the shared image gallery, and you have not imported those images, you can choose them here as well. And they will just be used to update your hosts within your host pools just as easy. In exact the same way if you would choose an image that has been imported into Nerdio Manager for WVD. So just so you know. You would select just, any desktop image you would like. You can also change the VM size, as you can see, or the OS disk at this time. And here you can tell how many machines can be updated at the same time. So again, parallel to each other. This is sort of the same thing you saw with, the migration from non-ARM to ARM. So from fall to spring, or whatever you like to call it as well. When I started out with in the graphical user interface part. Now, here you can also tell it, okay, how many things are allowed to fail before this whole process will be halted and reverted back, because this can also be scheduled. You can set a start date. You can also set a reoccurrence, and I think this one is very, very handy in a lot of environments. So you don't even need to use this to, for example, re-image your host. If you are looking for an easy reboot cycle, that's easily configurable this way as well. Have a look at your time zone, set the times, and of course there might still be active sessions on one or multiple of those machines. But again, we have the messaging mechanism before those machines will be re-imaged or resized in this case. Now, if you click OK, it will go to sleep until 12. And it will then go to work. And it's also good to know that, for example, the VM NIC, which is a separate resource within the resource manager of Azure, of course, as you might know, isn't touched. So that means the IP address will stay the same, your DNS won't change, Active Directory will stay the same. Well, that doesn't really have anything to do with the NIC, of course, but just know that your Active Directory name will also won't change. So you don't have to worry about all those things either. So that's what I had on desktop images, updating and things like that. So let's have a look at some of the more basic stuff when it comes to user management, for example. And also a couple of management things around stuff you can do with various host pools or separate host pools. Now, we don't have any active sessions at this time. Of course, this is it's a big environment, it's a demo environment, but it's not used that much, of course, with active users. But here you would be able to shadow sessions, to send messages, to log off sessions, disconnected sessions, you name it. You can filter it on a per host pool basis. And of course, you have multiple filtering options at the top here also. Okay, let's go back one. Now, think back at the beginning when I talked about the integrations and this being sort of the default configuration, if you will. Now I'm going to show you that you can configure all those settings on a per host pool basis as well. So for this, we would need to go to Properties, Active Directory. So here you can say, I don't want to use the default. I want to add in a custom AD configuration, which enables you to work with multiple domains on a per host pool basis again, or you can use separate organizational units to deploy your machines in, to manage your machines also on a per host pool basis, which, for GPO purposes or all sorts of other things you can think of is very handy to have. Let's see, so WVD is just the load balancing mechanism, but this only applies for hosted shared environments, of course, not in a one-to-one scenario. let's see, manage auto scale, WVD. WVD deployment, this is also a very nice one. So setting time zones, redirections, and all sorts of other things are available on a per host pool basis as well. If you would like to run PowerShell commands or scripts once the machines have been deployed within the host pool, so post-deployment, that's something you can configure here also. We can configure to use availability zones on a per host pool basis, really handy to have also. And I think most of you will be familiar with this script, I think, from the former VDI guys. I'm not sure if they are still active. Of course, Christian has blogged about this, but this is now in, well, it's still in preview, but it's part of the deployment phase as well, if it's something you would like to use, just so you know. So properties, custom RDP settings. So this is, well, basically what Patrick was or has been writing about. So the article, give it a read, because it definitely holds valuable information. Not sure if he mentioned that as well. My German isn't that good, to be honest, but okay. Well, I know he mentioned his post, but you know, not everything. So a lot of sessions you can easily check on or off. Of course, there are a lot more, easy to get to as well. And again, easy to configure or reset or anything else you would like to do. So just a few more. So these are just the Azure tags. You can give tags to resources from within Manager for WVD as well. Logics is an important one, of course. You can turn it off, you can turn it on, or you can say, I do not want to use the defaults, which again are configured under integrations as part of the main settings, sort of the default configuration, like I mentioned a couple of times. So you would be able to use a different storage location or use different parameters or, well, things like that. Let's see. Right, Sepago, of course. Sepago can be flipped on and off on a per host pool basis also, but I'll get to the Sepago Azure Monitor in just 1 or 2 minutes, I hope. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, this is a very nice one as well. So I was talking about with the auto scaling part with the one-to-one machines, so personal desktops, you know, with users being active at night, but if they have still active sessions, you don't want to lock them off. So here you can also configure, and you have multiple things to choose from. So it's very granular, if you will. So multiple details, or it's very detailed, I should say, from minutes to hours to days, and so on and so forth. And you have all of those same options for all of the other stuff you can configure here as well. You don't have to enable it or do it like this or from within Manager for WVD, but it's definitely handy that it's here. And of course, here you would then be able to configure also, if you look at the auto scaling part for personal assigned desktops, what happens if it's set to medium, users become inactive or disconnected or idle after, inactive or disconnected after a certain amount of time. And of course, then the auto scaling engine would be allowed to, scale in and shut down that machine. So great to have that in here as well. All right, just a couple of more things. So we already had talked about users and roles. I'll show you the other ones as well, not one by one, of course, but just know we have multiple built in. There's a custom role coming in one of the future releases as well. So one you can configure for yourself. Small differences between these roles, of course. Help desk speaks for itself. Reviewer means read only, and we spoke about the end user role. And we have various KB articles explaining you exactly how all this works, what the differences are between the various roles, I should say, perhaps. Right. So just one more thing, or perhaps 1 or 2 things. I'd like to talk about the latest addition around MSIX App Attach, which we can offer from the same management interface as well. So one of the first things you would need to do is add in a storage location for your app attach packages. And this would need to be an Azure Files location. But that's, it's linking just as with the network, the VNets and the resource groups, as you can see on here as well. Just link what you need to link, and that's how it starts. So once you have that done, we would go to the app attach page or tab. And here you can upload your MSIX App Attach packages. Fill in the name, friendly name. Of course, choose the file. You can work with certificates optionally as well. Choose the proper storage location to go with the package you want to upload, and so on and so forth. Once you've done that, and we've purposely done this in separate phases to make it as flexible as it can be, you can assign your users. So this is, very easy. Just search for a name, a group of users, and so on and so forth. Select it, click assign or unassign, depending on what you would like to do. And then those users, groups of users, will be assigned to that specific app attach package. And then one of the last things you would need to do is we actually have an app attach demo. You would go to manage. You would go to app attach apps. Excuse me. And then here you can turn it, well, it needs to be turned on, of course, and then select the packages as you just saw. Let me open it up again. Here we go. And then add in the app attach packages you would like to be able to offer through these hosts as part of this host pool. So again, very straightforward to use as well. Right, so with regards to monitoring, of course, we have Sepago, which I just mentioned, but everything is logged. So we can always see what happens within the environment, even if it's an auto-scale action, for example, why something went wrong, and so on and so forth. And that's something you can see within the various workspaces as well. So let's take field apps. As you can see here, well, it's also very detailed. So it will tell you exactly what happened at what time, why it did something, if it failed, what failed. So in many of the times, this will be descriptive enough to help you troubleshoot as well. And this is all part of the default solution and can be found on the logs. As you can see, you can hide all of these things, but it will never be thrown away. So this can be exported in JSON format, for example, and these are stored as part of the underlying SQL platform as a service, which will be deployed as part of Nerdio Manager for WVD as well. I just thought about, I mentioned or forgot to mention one thing. So if we have a host pool with hosts and we go to manage, then the top one, users and groups, is how you would, assign users to your host pools. So again, this is the same screen as you saw with app attach. So assign a user to app attach packages. And this is, of course, the sync between Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, search for users, groups of users, and again, click assign or unassign depending on what you would like to do. And then your users will be assigned to the host pool. Of course, monitoring, I'll just show you a simple tab, but you can go very fine-grained and very detailed with regards to how these reports may look for you personally. We have multiple videos on how to do the configuration, where you need to go, what you need to look for, where to click, which tabs to set, and so on and so forth. But everything you expect from an enterprise monitoring solution, you will find in the Sepago Azure Monitor. Just to give you a glimpse, and you can have as many dashboards as you would like. And you will start out, by the way, with 3 custom dashboards, or just basic dashboards, I should say, for you to further customize if that's something you would like to do. And I must say, a lot of our customers are definitely using it. Now, one of the last things I already mentioned, that we come out with a new release every month. And if you look back at the last 6 months, so 4, 5, 6 months, we had 2 releases on a monthly basis even. So it's pretty cool to work for a company which is so innovative on top of WVD. I always have lots to talk about, lots to share, lots to to promote, which is very fun to do as well. And as you can see, this environment is also used for development purposes. So that's also why you saw a couple of things which are not in the product today. If you would go and download it, let's say after the presentation. So you need to wait for a couple of those small things, like the migrate option, for example, for version 2.5.0, which will be released next week. But of course, here it is already released. And that's how you would do that being a customer as well. So the latest release will be on top. You would only need to deploy the top one, so it's incremental in that way. You won't have to worry about some of the older versions that you will see. And we will only show you 3 versions at a max. So just 1 or 2 slides to finish up, and thank you, Patrick, for mentioning this during your talk as well. So about a month ago, we launched the Nerdio Tech Insider program, which is actually on this slide, so the last slide. Very happy about how things are going. We have a lot of members already. There's a lot of interaction. So as you can see, we have a meetup page. We've had multiple meetups already. And the next one, as you could see on the previous slide, will be on the 21st. And we have a community edition from Nerdio Manager for WVD coming out. And that's on the 21st. So I would invite you all to participate in that event as well. to hear what it's all about and how to use it within your own personal Azure lab, for example, things like that, and a lot more details, of course. And of course, please consider joining our Tech Insider community. Join the meetup page, never miss an upcoming event. And we have a ton of events planned, with partners around Manager for WVD, around other technologies as well. And that's the thing. It needs to be technical. No marketing, no sales. We don't do those types of stuff. So you won't have any sales breathing down your neck if you are on one of the webinars, following one of the webinars. You don't have to worry about that. So please consider joining. That's it as far as I'm concerned with regards to the presentation. So thank you again very much, Patrick and Marcel, for having me tonight. It has been my pleasure to present and to demo Nerdio Manager for WVD for you guys. And if you have any questions, I will be around during the presentation of Thomas as well, which I'm looking forward to also. So definitely check that out as well. He has a very good Arnold Schwarzenegger imitation, by the way. Maybe he'll do it. I'm not sure if he's listening already, but maybe I can ask for it. But again, thank you. And if you have any questions, I will be around. And of course, I'm easy to find on Twitter, LinkedIn, Slack, Meetup, you name it. Okay, thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.